Chapter 4: What is a sacrifice? Now that I had the opportunity to stay, all the tensions renewed themselves to augmentation. Slowly but surely, this time it began from a fresh page, which allowed me to continue working towards my scholastic goals. Rita and I finally came to some kind of consensus that I would take summer school in the next stage of my schooling career, which was Sonora High School, for the purposes to get ahead. At the same time, I had to be able to balance my time to dedicate myself to family matters, which still continued to be somewhat of a challenge, because I tended to give all of my energy to studies, knowing that my time was ticking and the level of scholastic difficulties was increasing. But honestly speaking, no matter how much I tried to be a part of the family, it was not enough in Rita's eyes. We did, however, unanimously arrive at the decision to take health science, which was the most fun class I have ever taken. Despite the fact that we were learning about anatomical issues of the human body, we also were required to reflect about our own character, which is my favorite occupation, reflecting on my experiences and coming to some sort of epiphanies that ground my sense of existence. It is kind of like a rock or a conscious foundational support that I am able to lean upon. One of the things that I'd like to share is the mnemonic of my name. The following is a small excerpt that I came up with upon completion of the autobiography project in my health science class. My name is Alina, and each letter could potentially describe me. The first letter, A, could tell you how frequently abnormal I could be. The letter L will show you that being loyal to my family and friends is important to me. The letter I will convince you that I could be influential to people and easily influenced by them. The letter N will let you see how nervous I could get before a test or a life-changing event. The last letter of my name is A, that will always follow after me and will describe me as the most adventurous girl you've ever seen. Nevertheless, after graduation, as I strolled around the complex, lost in deep pondering and scattered thoughtfulness, I was greeted by many strangers who knew my name. "How do you know my name?" I asked in utter surprise. "I saw you getting the award," one of the strangers answered. "Don't stop pursuing your dreams, kid," they would nonchalantly encourage. The short in content and insignificant conversation, I felt an amazing sense of warmth by the continual confirmation from total strangers that my efforts amounted to something. At the same time, I did continue calling Murat in secret practically every day. I always had something to tell him, and our conversations were lively, extensive, philosophically profound, and cheerfully enlightening. Moreover, over the summer break, with stronger English skills, Hannah and I were virtually inseparable. She felt more like a family than my own blood family, which appeared very irksome to Rita. Around August, the most major perk to staying was the fact that Sophia's wedding was around August of 2005, and Sophia made me one of her bridesmaids. Sophia and Gil treated me like their younger sister. They respected my opinions, playfully teased me, formed jokes with me, and often would give me insightful advice towards anything I was going through. On top of that, I have a feeling that Sophia knew that I was keeping in touch with Murat. It was kind of an unspoken topic between us, but very much obvious. She seemed to understand the reasonability of keeping it a secret. From time to time, Sophia and I conducted discussions about Murat and his self-ostracizing tendencies, which I was trying to make sense of, but Sophia never definitively asked me if I was keeping in touch with him. Through my day-to-day extensive discussions with Murat, I got to know his greatest fears and hesitations to the point that I started to feel like some sort of a bridge or a mediator that enabled me to help him reconnect to his family. Nonetheless, Sophia took me out on an outing with her girlfriends before the wedding, and honestly speaking, I felt like an important person amongst her friends. The fact that they were older than me and made me feel very mature, that I could keep up with them. Although it was not very directly spoken between us, I also felt that Sophia knew, understood, and very well sympathized with my hardships with her mom. While I did not seem to endow Rita the feeling of motherhood, Rita did not put a lot of effort to make me feel like a daughter either, or even the remotest feeling of being a part of her family. When Sophia would come over, Rita would suffocate Sophia with her doting while excluding my presence. It was very apparent that the effort to develop a replica of a mother-daughter relationship was only one-sided, because I saw a starkly different behavior that she exhibited when Sophia would come over, as if the entire world had to stop and gasp at how amazing and cherished Sophia is. Not that she isn't, but the overwhelming emphasis rendered Rita's condescending view of me. Because it wasn't Rita's biological creation, there wasn't a chance to equate myself to the same measure of amazingness that Sophia emitted with her presence. Rita kept a close record of Sophia's every accomplishment, which directly translated to be a cause of Sophia's obedience to her mother. I observed Sophia very closely in relation to her mom and her outside view of things when she is away from her mom. Sophia just plays the part of being docile and agreeable to her mom, but she puts Rita aside and her views as she thinks, speaks, and does things completely different. When Sophia's wedding date was approaching with the gnashing of teeth, I convinced Murad to attend it at the very last minute. If it is not for Sophia, at least for me, I pleaded, because Murad was very indecisive about coming, with endless yes, no, yes, maybe, I don't know. It was very hard to count on him coming. The wedding rehearsal happened without Murad, and before the actual ceremony, unfortunately, no matter how much I tried to convince Sophia to include him in the procession, for some reason unknown to me, she refused to have him walking down the aisle. Very painfully, I looked into Murad's countenance as he sat in the audience, detached from the action, and as if telepathically I felt exactly what he felt. I cast out, feeling insignificant and apart from his very own family. I knew that Murad wanted to leave right after the ceremony. I knew exactly what was crossing his head even before he managed to do it, and Rita started panicking when she couldn't find him, myself included, but I made the panic much more hidden. Right after the very moment that the ceremony was over, I rushed to find Murad, and I found him in the parking lot, ready to enter his car. I implored him to stay for the celebrations, as I comforted him by the idea that I needed him around. Rita noticed that I had some kind of influence on Murad, and she made it possible that Murad sat next to me, as it seemed very obvious that Murad felt more comfortable around me. The wedding was magnificently glorious. The jubilance went up to the ceiling, and the food was deliciously superb. Murad and I enjoyed each other's companionship, and we connected even deeper. It was the last wedding that I have ever attended in my life so far. I was so thankful that I had that opportunity and had the opportunity to let Murad forget the uncomfortable feeling that he initially experienced. After the wedding, Murad explained to me that he made the decision to come because he wanted to make some kind of memory for Sophia's children to know that they have an uncle, at which point I knew that Murad loves Sophia, but just has a quirky way of expressing it. After I finished summer school, I officially began freshman year of high school. I was heavily involved in classes and extracurricular activities. I took a swimming class as my PE and drama. Unfortunately, although I was very attached to my lifestyle outside my family, very predictably, my relationship with Rita was suffering. I complained to Murad, and he supported me in my view of things, but he went further with this support as he convinced me to allow him to hire a lawyer to get me legalized, because he felt that my freedom was suffocated by the fact that I was undocumented. I was afraid that those efforts would be divulged into the open, but regardless, I did give him a go, as it seemingly was my only hope. Murad found out about an opportunity for me to get legalized through filing an application called Special Immigrant Juvenile Status, SIJS, which was meant for parentless, undocumented minors to get legalized. If we were to go with SIJS, this would mean that I wouldn't be able to summon my parents to be legalized, which sounded very applicable to my circumstances. However, my woes began from one gloomy wintry September day. I came from an exasperating day of school and was eagerly looking forward to talking to Murat. I dialed his number unsuspiciously, but what I did not know was the fact that Rita believed that she was sick, for which reason she did not go to work and had stayed upstairs in her bedroom. My routine was that I called Murat and Murat would call me back so that I wouldn't waste the phone bill and Rita wouldn't find out. I asked Murat to call me, which he did, and Rita upstairs picked up the phone. Murat said hello, and before I could even answer hello back, I heard Rita say hello in excitement, but Murat thought it was me, while Rita thought that Murat had decided to call her out of his free will, and he started spilling out everything about his dealings with the lawyer as my heart was thumping in acknowledgement of my ultimate doomsday. "Mama, is that you?" Murat finally realized, and Rita instantly got healthier and said that the avoidance of me was final this time. "Wait until Willie comes home," she demanded, and I started crying. Sophia and Gil coincidentally came too and found out about it. Rita demanded that I pack my stuff and be ready to go to the airport at that very instant, and I, through tears, did it very reluctantly. I sensed that both Sophia and Gil were on my side, although they tried to keep it an impartial standing. Sophia wanted to help find me a place as long as I would get my passport, but I refused. I exploded into hysterics and accidentally knocked the fan on the floor. Rita called the police and said that there was an illegal girl in their house who was vandalizing her property. 2 police officers came, one lady officer and one guy officer. The lady talked to me and the guy officer talked to Rita. I eloquently explained my situation to the lady police officer, and the lady was feeling for me as I was crying. I asked them if they could overrule or try to step in regarding Rita's decision to get rid of me, but she explained to me that they had no authority over that. As she listened to me, she asked me what grade I was in high school, and I said that I was a freshman. She retorted back to me that my skills of rationalization exceeded my age and that she would have thought I was a senior in high school. Then she said that I should just go with Willie and Rita to the airport, as she pointed out the fluorescent rainbow in the sky as a symbol of luck, and that everything would turn out for the good. I asked if they could take me to the airport themselves, but she insisted that I just go with my family and trust my destiny. Sophia and Gil came along looking as a support for Rita, but as I looked at them, they were there more as a support from me, although they couldn't reveal their sense of partiality towards me. At the checkpoint, once it was my turn to check in the luggage to go to my grandma to New York, I crashed into hysterics on the floor. My suitcase burst open in front of everybody, and I cried in desperation that I didn't want to go anywhere. I felt like everything I cherished was just forcefully yanked out of me. The friendships that I developed, the school that I attended, and all my endeavors in it, just in a moment, were forcefully confiscated from me. Rita, not in the slightest bit, appeared compassionate over me. One thing that I absolutely did not regret was keeping my relationship with Murat confidential from her, because her reaction was perfectly predicted by me. I would think sometimes, what was behind that reaction? Outrageous jealousy? A consuming sense of envy that Murat opened up to me more so than he opened up to her? Why is that? Why is it so unthinkably hard to communicate to Rita? My answer is because she turns everything about herself. She takes everything personally. Upon the smallest criticism that Murat had made in her address, she goes into temper tantrums like a 5-year-old, turning the entire house upside down and throwing things around. Rita is just unbelievably unstable and insecure, with a major inflated ego, Napoleon complex at the highest level of severity. The checkpoint faculty refused to allow me on the airplane in that state of mind. Then Rita was thinking what to do next with me, threatening at me that she would send me either to Ukraine, to my mother, or back to Israel, to my father. I tried to negotiate with her, but her heart was made of stone, of rigid metal, and she accused me of bewitching Murat. Willie just appeared helpless, seeing my trouble, and Sophia and Gil pretentiously maintained their impartiality as I looked at their stares of overflowing compassion towards me. Then finally, Rita came to a decision to send me to a group home where I heard you can get raped. We were waiting for a representative to come from a group home and take me for 3 hours. We arrived to the airport at 10 p.m. and the guy came at around 1 a.m. While waiting for a group home representative, I went into a corner, embraced my knees, and in a doubled over position, rocked back and forth, praying, God, please help. God, please help. My jaw was involuntarily clenching again. That always happens when I find myself in deep distress. Willie approached me in my desperation as my eyes were heavily inflated from crying so much and talked to me in a very comforting manner. He said that group homes were not that bad, that with my exuberant personality I would turn the experience into something bright and that I shouldn't worry. At the end of his comforting speech, he hugged me. I always looked up to Willie like a father figure that I so desperately lacked. Honestly speaking, I do not understand Willie. Is he really that blind? Does he really not see that Rita deprives him of his very own sense of masculinity by just fulfilling every single of her commands? Or does he see that but is afraid to act? Because if he would do the smallest thing against her wishes, he would be bound to lose her. Goodness, Bella was way unspeakably softer and a nicer spouse than Rita. Rita just abuses him, brainwashes him, and takes him away from his immediate family, which, by the way, at that time, Willie did not talk to Igor, his son, who harbors the same opinion of Rita as me. In fact, even more truthfully speaking, everybody that surrounds Rita is of the same opinion as me about her, but they don't have the audacity to speak it, even her own friends or her own relatives. It is just inevitably apparent. Rita always poses these ultimatums in front of Willie. That same year that I lived with them, Willie had gone through a prostate cancer operation. I was so disgusted by the sight of Rita because it was obvious that she was worried at the idea of losing him simply because Willie is like a teddy bear that she could hug or spiritually enslave or even in her own terms bewitch. Why would she even come up with that kind of disturbed, sick assumption? Is that because that's her own tactics of ensnaring someone into her own spider web? Words cannot describe how much wickedness Rita harbors in her spirit. Rita only cares about her own self. Period. However, there is a way to emotionally penetrate even the very wicked person. When the group home representative came, it was an African American person, not very much kept or looking like an actual representative. All of us gathered together in a circle: Sophia, Gil, Willie, Rita, I, and the representative. Rita had to sign formal documents for the group home representative to get legal custody of me, just like that, by one signature. As the representative was giving his speech, I surrendered to the idea of going to the group home, and I said to Rita with a direct stare in her eyes, Rita, if this is what you want, if that is what you think I should do, I would go to a group home. I was already mentally prepared to leave with no hesitations, and Rita finally cracked. No, I don't want you to go. I'll give you one last chance. From now on, your conversations with Murat will be monitored. And if you screw this one last chance, you are going back to your grandma, she responded. Understood, I helplessly replied. Then she asked for the representative's business card, just in case. After all that drama, we drove home. It was 2:00 in the morning, and I had to get up at 5 in the morning to get ready for a swimming practice at 6 in the morning. I was both in the swimming team and taking a swimming class. I was completely and utterly exhausted and very much emotionally distraught. I couldn't quite fall asleep despite my extreme sense of tiredness because the horror of the experience was still flashbacking in my head. Ironically, that very same day we had meditation exercises that I desperately needed, as though the universe, debatably my very own king of salvation, knew that I desperately needed that. As was promised, my conversations with Murad were closely monitored. When Rita was at work, she would confiscate the phone plug so that I couldn't call Murad after school. Also, she completely prohibited me from visiting Hannah, afraid that I would call Murad through Hannah's phone, and Hannah came to me to visit. Hannah saw that I was very much a mess. At school, my friends would approach and ask me what happened because I looked like a disaster, but I wouldn't be able to tell, not Hannah nor my friends. I didn't believe that they were at the stage of maturity to understand what I was going through. I tried to do homework and I couldn't concentrate. When I talked to Murat in front of Rita, he sensed that there was something I was burning to tell him. And I couldn't talk to him as freely as once before, because Rita was always around me with an extremely unappealing and scornful look. I wanted to let out everything that happened to me, because I was carrying the load around. The more Rita prohibited us from talking to each other, the more we yearned for each other. Rita also talked with my aunt in New York, revealing Murat's plan to legalize me, and both my aunt and Rita disapproved of it for different reasons. While my aunt believed that it would cause problems for mom's immigration, Rita was more concerned of Murat's money that he would spend in my regard. Finally, about 2 weeks after the gruesome airport experience, as I was doing Spanish homework in my room, as if Rita was expecting me to mess up, Murat called and I instinctively picked up the phone in my room. A major part of me wanted to believe that Rita and Willie were not home, for which reason I asked Murat if he would like to know what happened that night when Rita found out that we maintained a relationship, and Murat said that he very much wished to know. I broke down every single detail for Murat, revealing facts and feelings, and at some moment I felt a strange, shuddering silence around me. My phone was cordless, and I peeked down the stairs and saw my doom again. Rita and Willie were sitting on the sofa in the living room. I understood that Rita had heard every word that I had said, and this time her riddance was absolutely final. Willie asked her to let me stay, and she shouted at him, "What, she don't want her to leave after what she has said about me to my own son?" Willie shrugged in helplessness with an arrested and surrendered silence. "Is it me or her you are supporting?" she continued. I didn't hear what Willie said, but I was crying again, and this time Murat said that he was flying over from Northern California to Southern California that instant to talk with his mom. While flying, Murat called the police and complained to the police that Willie called me a prostitute, and when Willie has never done that. Murat understood it wrong. Morsha was the one that I complained had called me a prostitute, and the police came and talked to me thinking that Murat had said that there was a prostitute in Rita's house. When the police officer guy came, he talked to me very much concernedly, understood that I was no prostitute and that there was a miscommunication. I explained to him that Rita wanted me out of the house, and he said that he would try to talk to her. While Murat was flying over, Rita demanded that my grandma fly over to get me at the very instant that she called. Willie told me not to open the door for Murat when he came because that would get Murat arrested, but I did. Murat showed up at the doorstep and Rita called the police on him in front of his very own eyes. She did not even give him a chance to talk to her, for which reason Murat had to leave, and he said to Rita that I had human rights and he was going to fight for them. Weirdly enough, because Rita wanted to know what he was up to, she allowed me to talk to Murat through the phone as she was listening to our conversation from another phone. Murat told me to go to a school counselor and tell him about what was going on. That same night, the police came and reprimanded me, and this time they sided with Rita. Rita made it especially convincing that Murat and I had a romantic relationship and that Murat should be caught and arrested. How Rita would win by having him arrested, I don't know. But for precautionary measure, they said that if he was to appear at his own mother's doorstep at the very house that he used to live in, he would be arrested for trespassing. Rita insisted that he should be arrested for maintaining a romantic relationship with a minor, but she was explained by them that he couldn't be arrested for that by just proof that we had a distant relationship and no proof of sexual contact. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I went towards the school and waited for about 4 hours for my swimming practice to start. I couldn't sleep, nor did I do any homework. I wanted to talk to my counselor, but my counselor was not in attendance, so I talked to the vice principal, Mr. Day, and he heard me out. He told me not to worry. In fourth period, I was taken out of my science class and was summoned to Mr. Day's office, where I saw the entire gang, my grandma, Rita, Willie, and the vice principal. Rita tried to make a very compelling case of my romantic relationship with Murat by printing out all the phone calls that I made to Murat, which didn't say anything. Mr. Day just talked to me and said that I should go with my grandma, complimented me that I was a bright one, and reassured me that everything would be all right, at which point I was officially checked out of the school. Then Willie and Rita drove myself and Grandma to the Long Beach airport and left us. And Willie just said that I shouldn't take all of this personally. It just didn't work out between us. He put it in a nutshell. I called Murat from a public phone and told him where we were. Murat came and he looked not less fatigued than me. It was obvious that he didn't shut an eye throughout the entire night. Murat felt that, based on the stories that I told him about New York, I shouldn't leave. He said that Grandma and I should move in with him, which, thinking of the idea now, is completely absurd. Grandma tried to convince me to go with her, as she said that the ticket was already bought, but I didn't want to. Then Grandma suggested talking to the police at the airport. Murat approved the idea. We entered the airport police office and I told them my plight. At the beginning, they were very sympathetic, but gears changed when they got a translator from my grandma, who mentioned the fact that Murat and I were not blood relatives and the major gap between our ages, which was 14 and 27. They immediately changed their perspective, said that I should go with Grandma, and Murat had to leave the premises or else he would be arrested for trespassing. Same old, I thought to myself. Murat left, and I sat in their office all saddened that Murat's adventure had to end that way, as the police were filling out a report about what had happened. All of a sudden, the door of the office was opened widely, and Murat thunderously came in with outstretched arms, telling them, "Arrest me for trespassing." At that moment, I don't know what the police officers were thinking, but I understood that Murat and I were very emotionally invested to each other to let each other go that easily. I was overwhelmed with fear because I didn't want to run the risk of having him in jail for me. I was also very surprised that Murat would do such a drastic sacrifice for me. The police took him outside of the office and started to tackle him to check if he had drugs on him, only to find out that he had none. I asked the police faculty to allow me to talk to him and tried to persuade him to go home. They agreed but asked me to talk to him in English. Very sheepishly and in surrendered tone, I asked Murat to go home, and Murat just laughed, ignoring my plea. Then they took Murat away and instructed Grandma and me to wait. A lady police officer told me that when I turned 18 that I should kick Murat on the butt and that I should take drama classes because the scenery I was involved in was very dramatic and I played it well. Afterwards, the immigration officer approached me and started the conversation, asking, "You couldn't find yourself a younger boyfriend?" while waving his authoritative hand over me, which appeared in a somewhat teasing manner. I snickered, but then he went to saying that my visa was expired and they knew that I wasn't documented in the country. The immigration officer continued to say that if Murat wouldn't leave, they would have to deport me. I chuckled in a sarcastic despair, but said that Grandma had a green card and I was still a minor. Honestly speaking, I was so tired of the soap opera that I didn't care what happened to me, as long as all of it would blow over soon and I respond to the immigration officer, do whatever you will. I'm slightly tired here. We waited for a while and Murat was still stubborn. The immigration officer approached me again, took clueless Grandma and me inside the black car, gave me some sort of documents, and told me the following. We said to Murat that we are deporting you, when in fact we will not. Bring these documents to an immigration office as soon as possible. You must play the part of being deported. We will show you to him as if you are deported. You are not to speak in Russian to him except from saying bye. Then one of the police officers took details of my appearance, the color of my eyes, my hair, and so on, and told me to not dare to come back to California until I turned 18. I thought to myself whether they really could enforce that. Then the police accompanied me and showed me in front of Murat. He looked beat, exhausted, and pale, surrounded by police officers who held his arms in the back of him in case he resisted, and told him, "You see what you have done?" I gave him a wide, beaming smile and told him, "Bye," as I was instructed. The police officer that took information about me told me that he would never forget this incident, and I told him that neither would I. Then Grandma and I arrived to New York on September 19th, 2005, and I knew that it wasn't quite the end of my turmoil. Oh my God, I have gone through so much, and that was only just my humble beginnings.